And a top story at 7, SARS has for the second consecutive year collected over R1 trillion in tax revenue, despite a negative media campaign that slowed tax compliance in February. SARS Commissioner Tom Moyane was joined by Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba and his deputy Sfiso Buthelezi for the announcement of the 2016-17 financial year results. This is in sharp contrast to the relationship between SARS and Treasury during Pravin Gordhan's term in office. Gigaba says SARS was an asset to the country, whereas Gordhan viewed the revenue service as a liability that needed to be managed.
The preliminary results show SARS having exceeded the revised estimate by over 300,000 rands. Much more significant is that for the second year in a row, SARS broke the trillion rand mark. We are also pleased to announce a growth in refunds for the same financial period of 8.6%. That refunds included outstripping revenue growth, which was 7%. Media statements that infer that there is lack of leadership at SARS and trust have a concomitant impact on taxpayers not being able to do what is statutorily required out of them. We have noticed as of February that there were thousands of nil returns in terms of taxpayers, and this we could see from the systems that we have. Taxpayers who have been able to pay their taxes and submit provisional tax in August, all of a sudden, in February, we saw a very slow uptake.
The numbers being reported today bear testimony to the fact that the South African Revenue Service remains an asset of great value to South Africa, with 14,500 employees who are committed to doing their bit in ensuring the fiscal sovereignty. It is very important to note that the revenue collected by SARS as of midnight 31 March 2017 has been done in a current economic growth rate of 0.3% as published by Stats SA. The poor economic conditions clearly play their part in our revenue collection ability. The changes we have noticed in the economy mean shifts in the tax basis for various taxes.
Now, the difference between Gigaba and Gordhan's approach to SARS is evident in the statements each minister made about the revenue service. Gordhan blames SARS for the 30 billion rand tax revenue shortfall, but Gigaba says that the 1.14 trillion rand tax revenue collection is an achievement. Gordhan blames SARS management of being lax in revenue collection, but Gigaba congratulated SARS on improved tax revenue collection efforts. Gordhan says SARS did not meet Treasury projections, but Gigaba says SARS spared Treasury from borrowing, although borrowing targets had not been revised. And joining us in studio is Mark Kingan, a Group Executive for Tax Relationship and Management at SARS, all of 33 years, and Sfiso Mahlangu, ANN7 political analyst, joins us. Again, good evening, gentlemen, and thanks so much for joining us. Mark Kingan, I mean, just to look at the comparison between the new leadership in Treasury, your observation when it comes to what Commissioner had already deposed, saying that it was a very strained relationship, that there was bad blood between him and the minister. Working in that environment, did you observe anything?
Obviously, it would probably be inappropriate for me to comment. You must remember I'm a taxman. I serve whoever, and that is my role. I've served for 33 years. And so I don't get into who is in control where. We just do our job with excellence, and that's what the SARS staff try to do. Do the best that we can, ensure government has got the resources required.
He's obviously got a very good PR.
Yes, absolutely. Company. But after 33 years, of course, you pick up a few traits. So he started practicing before you and I were born, Cindy.
I'll receive that. But let's get into the crux of the matter here. Well, in terms of the 30 billion rand tax revenue shortfall vis-a-vis what we now know is a 1.14 trillion rand revenue collection. Where's the truth in all of this?
Well, I think very importantly, the minister set in the budget of last year, February last year, 1.175 trillion rand. He revised it downwards in October last year with the medium-term budget statement to 1.152 trillion. and he revised it again to 1.144 trillion in the budget on the 22nd of February, which we reached on Friday evening. Now, obviously, there have been downgrades before, and I think that would be fair to say. So if we go back to the financial crisis of 2008, I think we had a 60 billion difference at that point in time. So it's not the first time that we've had a difference in revenue collection being announced between the budget and then subsequently medium-term budget statement, and then obviously in the budget for that year.
Yeah, I mean, the Commissioner also cited the fact, in terms of the narratives that is in the court of public opinion and how this has impacted on returns or people filing their taxes. Is that your observation as well, that the negative press influence people to essentially even break the law, if you will?
In terms of my engagement, and I deal with a lot of clients, I'm not seeing that specifically. There has been, and which the Commissioner alluded to, where there were certain people who paid in August but did not pay in February. But there can be reasons for that. It depends totally in terms of the financial data as at August last year and as at February this year. We need to remember the financial position in the country obviously does dictate people's ability to pay. So we do find some employers are withholding pay as you earn and not paying it over to us. And VAT the same, that they hold it from they sell goods and they don't pay the VAT over to us. So obviously our focus as a revenue agency needs to ensure that people are paying their rightful portion.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the message, Aswiso, is that we, as upstanding citizens of this country, we need to abide by the laws and do our bit to ensure that the country is functioning. So, as maybe what Mark Kingan was saying is that we need not see the negative press as what influences people's virtuous and reasoning.
Sometimes it's not members of the press, Cindy, that challenge the situation. The reality is that there was a very antagonistic relationship between the then finance minister and Mr. Moyane. The relationship was not clean at all. I remember Mr. Moyane at his press conference citing the fact that Mr. Pravin Gordhan would shout at him publicly in meetings, would insult him and make derogatory statements. Now you get the head of Sars making comments like that. Once upon a time we had one of the other executives on this panel, and the gentleman was sharing about how difficult it is for them to conduct meetings with Mr. Pravin Gordhan. And though SARS has performed well, I do hope that because there's obviously a camp that still belongs to Mr. Gordhan. We've seen that when our reporter for NN7 attempted to ask Mr. Gordhan a question, and there was cheers and claps and noises that came from some of the SARS staff. And of course, there is a faction that he represents at SARS. That's to be true because he also headed that department. But I do hope that SARS will assist Mr. Melusi Gigaba in the great task that is ahead, so that they don't make it as mammoth as it shouldn't be, even that they assist him both in terms of income tax and value, and that there might be a bridge now between finance and SARS, and we don't see a break in relationship. And then we don't have to speculate as media officers. And I mean, if you hear Mr. Moyane say this about his senior, the then finance minister, and cite how their relationship is, as a taxpayer, I might become very reluctant to pay my taxes to an organization like that because I don't seem to trust Treasury. I do hope that the appointment of Mr. Melusi Gigaba will empower South Africans and restore their faith to say your taxes will go to the right place. We work with Treasury, that the Department of Finance, Treasury and SARS are in fact one to make this country work closer. So I think a united front with these arms of government will really help even taxpayers to look at them as one and to not politicize them, because I think because of Mr. Gordhan, SARS had become a political tool that he had an antagonistic relationship with. May SARS become the receiver of revenues that they used to be. And they must take the money and represent us well. This money goes to the construction of schools and roads, and that's what it should be for.
Yeah, and I mean, this is what Commissioner had also said on the show as well, the fact that it's not an easy feat to be able to collect and even exceed your own expectations.
Not
2
easy at all.
consecutive years that you've reached and surpassed your 1 trillion rand revenue collection. What were the challenges? What makes it even more difficult? I mean, you've got the systems in place, you've got the necessary personnel. What makes it so increasingly a difficult feat to achieve?
To collect taxes. Well, I mean, there's so many factors, and obviously the economic position within the country, slow growth, obviously has a direct impact in terms of revenue collection. We do obviously also have people trying to commit fraud. In other words, trying to elicit refunds where it's not due. And there's quite a considerable amount of that going on, which we have to stamp out if we want the country to go forward. We can't afford to have people trying to steal from the system. So those are some of the challenges, and it leads to some of the complaints. When we look at refunds, for instance, and the complaints that came about refunds, we have to stop certain returns that we get to enable us to evaluate, is it legitimate or not? And obviously some people may believe there's unneeded delays there, but our commitment is firstly to collect the right amount of tax, 1.266 coming forward in the year that started, and we're already on the road for that, but also to ensure that traders, where they due a refund, get it on time, and that we facilitate trade properly through our border posts.
And I mean, just for a viewer, taxpayer's point of view, so like you're saying, the whole politicizing of the matter, essentially what we need is to have confidence in SARS, but the relationship between Treasury as well. I don't know if it's your observations, early days, of course, with Finance Minister Malusi Kigaba taking office, whether already there's an indication that there is amendment of relationship there.
You know what, the economic periphery in this country is not going to be easy after Mr. Gordon's leaving. It was never particularly easy, but you've just seen there's a downgrading that just happened. So it's not going to be an easy tenor for anybody. It's going to be very difficult because the agents against economic empowerment and radical economic transformation are really going to fight. And so those are things to avoid, particularly in this country. And I hope even Mark, who's sitting here, will allow SARS to believe that they are not a political organization. They must not be drawn into political spats. And I do hope that even SARS itself, as with Treasury, that they don't become agents that are anti-transformation. Because the one thing that many South Africans had a problem with in Mr. Gordon's administration was that Treasury and Mr. Gordon seemed to be anti-transformation. I think they must heed the call of the president because they are a government function and must allow the work of transformation to happen in this country. And transformation, I think we must put it out there, is not to service only black people. Transformation must work work better if we have better schools for young black children, if the roads are better, if black people are given jobs in this country. It means that the country runs better, that the country runs smoother. These deal with the claims of evil that are out there, issues of crime and issues of poverty, which also cause many, many social evils in this country. So I think that SARS, and hope that SARS in this tenor will allow itself to not be opposed to radical economic transformation, but they may come as one, as the government entity they are, and transform this country. I think the day for that has arrived.
And just in, Mr. King, the lack of leadership or the question around governance issues at SARS, whether there are any investigations, please take the nation in your confidence and tell us that this is not a riderless ship, that there isn't overt corruption or rather flouting of laws, etc. What is going on?
We are committed and we continue to be committed, and I've been all through my life and my colleagues that we do the right thing. Coming back to what the gentleman just said with regards to transformation, we see ourselves as being key to ensure that we provide the necessary resources for government. Not only there, but also to enable other things. And I'll give you an example, to ensure that the non-profit sector is empowered to provide those AIDS clinics. That's the transformation that we need. We need to give government the resources to build the schools he's referenced, to provide the hospitals, to provide the medication. And the leadership is there, and we're committed to do that. That's how we reached the 1144 figure. And we will continue to do so and do the right thing.
I mean, we also heard that there were executive key personnel that left or resigned en masse, leaving a vacuum there in terms of the skill set at SARS. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to achieve these kind of results if you didn't have the necessary back office support.
Obviously, we've got excellent people. And I think that the more I work with the people at SARS, we've got superb people who can stand up in any area of expertise, whether it be transfer pricing, whether it be in terms of the legal frameworks that exist in terms of tax law. We've got superb resources, and we've got brilliant resources. Obviously, there goes cycles, and if you would see some of the statements today, we are recruiting more people in terms of transfer pricing, which is one of the areas, base erosion, profit shifting, that is ongoing. We are committed to improve continuously, and we are committed to make sure the resources come in.
And so that depends, obviously, the interdependent relationship between SARS and Treasury. You cannot interfere with that or isolate. And I, with Malusi Gigaba being there, many saying that he's ill-experienced, he doesn't have the economic background. To an extent, he had to pretty much articulate his CV, whereas the erstwhile minister never had to do that.
Well, it's very unfortunate why Mr. Gigaba would be under such attack anyway. Mr. Pravin Gordhan was a pharmacist, for goodness sake, and he ended up heading up Treasury, being a finance minister. Mr. Trevor Manuel was an engineer. At least Melusi Gigaba's got a postgraduate education in policy and some economics, and he would understand a lot of how to run a country. He has a background in public works, and the other thing, I don't think Mr. Gigaba appointed himself to this position, and I don't think he raised his hands. I don't know if a nomination was run to say who wants to be the minister, so that he could have raised his hand. And so it's unfortunate for him to be judged before he performs. I think South Africans must trust him. And as I've said, SARS must give him the support that he needs, particularly also in his mission for radical economic transformation, because it is what South Africans have been waiting for. But this is not just an economic battle, Cindy. Any economic battle is very political, and every political battle is always very, very economic. So during this economic struggle that South Africa needs to steer itself in, it is very political. So Melusi, as well as SARS, can expect that there's going to be slurs against them. They're going to be attacked, not because they cannot perform, because some people, some particularly agents, are against the work of transformation. Yeah. So he will not fail because he's failing as a leader. It is because agents who want to keep their place, who want to keep a tight grip on the economy, will feel threatened by the work that Melusi will be bringing.
Mr. King, just in wrapping up, I mean, the key takeaways from not only your historic or consecutive achievement, what for you, and lessons learned under the previous administration, as it were, and the key highlights of today's presentation?
Well, it's not for me to speak, obviously, in terms of the different administrations. I made it very clear. We serve, and that's what our motto is. What the key thing we take away from here, SARS staff are committed to do the right thing and to collect everything and we serve to make South Africa great. And that's our commitment. And we will continue to do so in the year ahead.
And for those of us that don't necessarily understand taxation and all the aspects of it or the fundamentals, what can you say in terms of the contribution that you've made to the economy and to encourage people to submit in time?
Well, if you look at the contribution, and I was just looking at the figures just coming in here, we refunded 222 billion rand. In terms of refunds, in terms of individual taxes, value-added taxes, and company taxes. 181.4 billion of that being in terms of a VAT. So we play a pivotal role in the economy, and we believe that that makes a huge difference.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Mr. Mark Kingan, Group Executive for Tax Relationship Management at Sars, Fiso Mahlango, political analyst. You really denied me that one question on the relationship aspect.